Hi, everyone. And this is another story that is autobiographical. It is true from my certain point of view, except I may have some of the details slightly out of sequence, but I'm doing my best to recall it as I remember things. It all begins with how I first learned to harness magic. I was 9 years old, and my older brother had come home from visiting some other boys, and he was excited and wanted to show me something. And he began to tell me a story. I was walking down a dirt path. I had picked up a sword and a shield. And as I was going down the path, I encountered a large, ruined, ancient stone tower. What do you do? What do I do? What would anyone do? This was a completely different kind of story where I get to make the decision of what happens next. So I went up to the iron-bound door, climbed the moldering steps, and put my body weight against the creaking, rusty hinges to open up what lay beyond. And inside the tower was a horrible creature with fangs and a large rusty axe, which then rushed to the attack. And that's where I first learned about this kind of magic, which is the ability to run simulations of real life in this fantasy sandbox that allowed me to understand people and motivations and morality and meditation on the nature of good and evil. It allowed me to understand the world and its different perspectives in fantasy writ large. That was tremendously helpful just for sitting down on my own. And then once I ran out of simulations to run on my own, I could sit down with other people and we could collectively see how things go in the story. This was a remarkable tool, and I don't know what I would have done without it. Anyway, decades passed. I went to university, met a whole bunch of very interesting people, and we all gamed and did various other things. And I think maybe a decade after we all graduated and had gone our ways, one person in our group, and since I'm on an airport kick, I'll call him Logan to protect privacy. Logan had had a health scare. And on that basis, another person in that group decided we should bring all of us back together again and resume playing the games that we did back at university. And so it was that 8 of us got back together again initially. And then over the 20 or so years that this campaign went on, the 8 went down to 6, and then the 6 went down to 5 as people had to scatter, move, had personal lives, kids, and other conflicts. But the 5 of us were very close, and we all enjoyed telling this one lengthy story, which was very complex with all of our different backgrounds and everything that we individually contributed to create something that was a bigger part than any of us individually could have brought. The world was a complicated one, and it took us years to figure out that a number of things that we were doing in the world, a number of the stories were connected. And behind those connections was something that was wily and slippery and eldritch and difficult to understand. There were plans within plans, and we as a group pursued those plans to try and understand what was really going on at the root of things. And it did take us years, but we finally found out. We encountered the dragon. For this game world only had one dragon. It was ancient beyond age. It had come from the stars. The creature was immortal. It was alien in its thinking, and it was utterly cold-blooded and beyond human comprehension. It was an undefeatable, immortal creature. And the encounter left us all, well, we all sort of thought that we could walk away from it and go about worrying about other things. Now that we knew there was a dragon, we knew it could not be defeated, we would turn our attention to things that we could, on battles that we could win. But then there was Logan, and he took this personally somehow, that this dragon existing in this world was a personal affront. And so he didn't care if it was immortal, that it was undefeatable, that it was immensely more powerful than anything we could imagine. He was going to figure out a way to vanquish this creature. And he took it upon himself personally over the years as we continued to tell the story and evolve the world, that he kept building up the resources and pushing us. And I should mention here as an aside, Logan is broad-shouldered and wide-chested. He was a big guy with big emotions who would have, if you took the term boisterous and looked it up in the dictionary, it applied to him. He would be loud in every way, loud and happy, loud and upset, but he was a good friend to have for a bunch of introverts, because he was the one driver that would make sure that we would get together, that we would get to next game. He was a catalyst for the rest of us who otherwise would be inert, because we were all a bunch of introverts, a bunch of nerdy introverts. And he was, well, he wanted to be nerdy, and he was in his own way, but he was also, I think, better in his way than we were in ours. But Logan took it upon himself and drove the rest of us to it, that we would find a way to confront and defeat this dragon. And years of research and progress went by as we learned and built up our resources and power and magic and so on and so forth in this world. Until, Logan had a second health scare, and he started losing weight, and it was clear that he was ill. He was often no longer able to eat, but he still wanted to game because that was his outlet. It was a way for him to escape the world that that had become so difficult for him. And so we get together regularly, and we were at a point where we were getting powerful enough that we could potentially confront the dragon. And when the person running the game saw how things were going, he thought that it was a good idea to bring this 20-year-ish old campaign to a head and allow us to have this final confrontation, the final battle with the dragon. And it took place over several sessions. So it was weeks and weeks where the battle was fought kind of all throughout different areas. And the dragon was impossible to defeat, but we were also very difficult to unseat. So we pulled out all the stops of all the resources we had, the contacts, the knowledge, and put that into effect to gain the upper hand, and then the dragon would gain the upper hand, and it would drive us away. We would regroup and rally. We would drive it to escape, and then to face us once again. And it's sort of throughout the game world, this massive battle ensued, and there was no winning, but no losing this battle, until finally, at the end of several sessions, the person running the game decided that the dragon came to us in this stalemate and decided to parley. And we managed to negotiate with the dragon that it would leave to return to the stars. And in return for its leaving, it would leave us alone, and the world would be allowed to proceed on its own without the machinations of the dragon in the background. And the dragon kept its word, and that was the end of the campaign. Only that's not the end of the campaign, because that's not how things ended. For Logan, there was no way of defeating the dragon. It became clear that this was a battle that he would not win, and he would pay for it with his life. And when it became clear that the dragon was winning, Logan managed to rally all of us, and not just us, but a whole hall full of people who all knew him, and many of whom cared deeply for that loud and boisterous man. And we gave our goodbyes, and he gave his goodbyes. And I think about 6 weeks later, we were at his wake. Now, Logan being a boisterous guy, one of the things that he always wanted, he insisted, as he was first jokingly, but still jokingly later too, he always wanted a Viking funeral. So he wanted to be put on a Viking longship that was sent out into the harbor and then have the ship set on fire. Unfortunately, in our state, even though we do border the ocean and it's theoretically feasible, I think they'd frown upon us setting a longship out into, say, one of our harbors and setting it on fire. So at his wake, Logan had the next best thing. I don't know how this was planned, but he was cremated, so he got his fire. And then the urn into which he had been placed was had on top of it a Viking longship. So in a way, he got his wish. And as we all got together to think about Logan, as it was only a month and a half, 2 months at most after we had last seen him and said our goodbyes, I went outside for a couple of minutes, and the funeral home was close to Logan's hometown. And it was this sort of in a little wooded, secluded place with a river that had gone on behind it. And as we were driving into the event, it had been raining. Well, I went out, I think, while dinner was being served, and the sun had broken through from the clouds, and there was the most staggeringly beautiful double rainbow that I have ever seen in my life. And the way that it was so tangible that it was almost as if only you could get to the other side of the river, you could almost reach out and touch where the rainbow was going to ground. And I was so mesmerized by seeing that I couldn't even go back inside to let everyone else know what was going on outside. There was one other person from our group who saw this, and so it bore witness to this serendipitous, unlikely event. But it was the most excellent send-off for a person for whom we cared very deeply. I still miss him, and we all still miss him.